So the first part of chapter 5 has started with us working on graphing and vertex form and standard form, right? Just getting a basic introduction to parabolas and quadratics. And now 5.3, we start talking about, with 5.3, two different ways that we can solve a quadratic and determine the value of x that makes the function equal 0. So we talked about graphing it, and we talked about factoring it. We're now looking at a third way to solve quadratics that make the function, or to find the values of x that make the function equal 0. This one's called completing the square. Now, what I want you to think about is, why is it called completing the square? What exactly are we doing? Now, this is a process. This is a 6-step process. And actually, only one of the steps is optional. There's only one step that's optional. So it's either a 5-step process or a 6-step process. Okay, there'll be no middle fingering in this one. These you have to do all 5, or all 6. Here's our function. 2x squared plus 8x minus 12. And I'm going to take you through an example, and each line is going to correspond with a step. So the first step is to get all the variables to one side and all the constant terms to the other. So I'm going to start just by adding 12 to both sides. That was step 1. So step 1 has me sitting like this. 1. Move everything over. Step 2, make the leading coefficient the number 1 by dividing everything by a. Remember, a is the letter that we want. A is the letter that we want for in front of the x squared term. Okay, so make the leading coefficient 1 by dividing everything by a. So right here, the leading coefficient currently is 2. So we need to divide every term by 2. Okay? Shoot, what happened here? There we go, that looks better. I'm sorry. Something clicked ahead without me noticing. So divide everything by 2. So that's the second step, to get to a point where we have a 1x squared plus 4x equals 6. Okay? So this is step 2. Make the leading coefficient 1 by dividing everything by a. Then it says complete the square by adding b over 2 squared to both sides. So we're going to add something here. And if we add it to one side, we have to add it to the other side. Okay? So 4. 4 right now is b. So b is 4. So we need to add 4 over 2 squared to both sides. Well, 4 over 2 squared, 4 over 2 is 2, 2 squared is 4. Okay? So we need to add 4 to both sides. That is the step called completing the square. Right there, that's step 3. If we polish that up a little bit, continuing in step 3, we are here. So step 3 carried on one more second, takes us to right here. Okay, I'm going to move my 3 so it's lined up over here, I decided. So that's where we are right now. And then it says factor it as a perfect square. There's a type of factoring called factoring perfect square trinomials. This x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 10. We need to factor x squared plus 4x plus 4. Some of you should already be able to see what this is going to factor as, but if not, the way to make a 4 is with a 2 and a 2. This x squared has to be x and x. So as we go through and do the factoring step, we're going to get x plus 2 and x plus 2. Here's why this is awesome. X plus 2 squared equals 10. Step 4 has taken this to x plus 2 squared is 10, and now that it's written as something squared, we get to step 5. We want to take the square root of both sides. But when we do that, we have to remember the plus or minus. When we use the square root to solve something, we need to account for the fact that we have two solutions. Everything we've looked at so far has had the parabola intersecting in two places. And so those two places are best accounted for with that plus or minus, right? The square root of 9 is 3, because 3 squared is 9. But negative 3 squared is also 9. And so we need to show that 3 times 3 is 9, but also negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. The square root of 10 times the square root of 10 is 10. The negative square root of 10 times the negative square root of 10 is also 10. Here's what that takes us to. When we take the square root of both sides using plus or minus, step 5 takes us to right here. X plus 2 equals the square root plus or minus the square root of 10. Then it says solve for both values of the variable. So we need to subtract 2 from both sides for our final and sixth and final step. X equals negative 2 plus or minus 10. One solution is negative 2 plus 10, plus the square root of 10, The other solution is negative 2 minus the square root of 10. That is completing the square. It's another method for solving. This method is probably the most difficult. Okay? It's kind of fun. I think it's kind of cool. But it is also the most difficult. So, that's a lot. I'm going to just leave this for a second. I'm going to let you think. Pause it if you need a second to go back and see. Replay it if you need to see it again. Because the next thing I want to do is I want you to try one. I'm going to put it up and I want you to try one. And if you get stuck, push play, listen, and then pause it, and then kind of see if you can get it. And then hear the next step, and then pause it. So I'll take it very, very step by step. This was just a basic first example to get you started. Okay, so let's look at a different example. I'm really challenging you with this second example to really walk through it and give it some due diligence. Okay, all the steps are there for you on the right, so I want you to try it. Okay, I'm going to go kind of walk through it kind of slowly. Okay, push pause. Give it your best effort. Please, I'm not sitting next to you making you write the pencil, so this is on you a little bit, but just give this a try. Okay? Okay, how'd you do? How far did you get? You paused it, you made it happen. How far did you get? Let's check it. Okay, so that first step says move all variable terms to one side and all constant terms to the other. So I'm just going to start by adding 18. That's step 1. 3x squared minus 15x equals 18. If that right there is all the further you got, great. Now you're here. Now listen, see if you can pick something up, and then go from there. Now we need to make the leading coefficient 1 by dividing everything by a. A here is 3, so hopefully you were able to divide everything by 3. Divide me by 3, divide me by 3, divide me by 3. Everything gets divided. Everything gets divided. X squared minus 5x equals 6. This one's already going to be tougher than the one we just did. Reason why this one's going to be a little tougher, because guess what? 5 does not divide by 2 nicely. Sorry. But now we're at step 3. If this is all the further you got, great. Let's try step 3 together. Complete the square by adding b over 2 squared to both sides. In this problem, b is negative 5. Can you get it with that piece of information? If not, keep listening. If you think you got it, give it a try. So I'm doing negative 5 over 2 squared. Negative 5 over 2 squared is negative 2.5. And negative 2.5 squared is a little bit tougher to do in our heads. So if you need to, grab that calculator. Click away. 6.25, right? So we are going to add a 6.25, squish it in there, into both sides. So we're going to add a 6.25 to both sides. All of a sudden this has gotten way tougher to factor. We can still factor it as a perfect square. We still know it's going to be x and x. Okay, this is my guess is most of you got stuck right here. My hope is you made it to here. If not, okay, we'll just keep practicing. But my guess is you got stuck here. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This is x minus and minus because I got to make a negative 5. But that b over 2 is really what's going to get put in here. That 5 divided by 2, negative 5 over 2, that's really what I'm going to put in here. And for some of you, it might be easier to look at like this. Okay? That might be a little bit easier to look at, but b over 2 helps us decide what to factor. B over 2 goes in as that number with x. Okay? So let's get this finished. Take the square root of both sides. Remember the plus or minus. Square root, square root. So you slip that plus or minus in. The square root of x minus 2.5 squared is x minus 2.5. How boring is that? The square root of plus or minus, the plus or minus square root of 12.25. Okay? Did you get this one? This one's actually pretty sweet. It doesn't look good. It does not look good for us, but if we take the square root of 12.25, it's actually pretty good looking. It's 3.5. So we have a plus or minus 3.5. Then, to finish solving, solve for both sides of the variable. Take a 2.5 on both sides. Not 25, my bad. So x either equals 2.5 plus 3.5, or x equals 2.5 minus 3.5. That means x either equals 6, or x equals negative 1. That is a tougher version, but the steps stay the same. I hope you did okay. This is the process we want to get good at doing. This is the process we want to follow. This is completing the square. We're going to talk a little bit more about why it's called completing the square. It actually goes back a little bit to geometry and how people didn't always use numbers when they were talking about numbers. They used shapes. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not too worried about you getting that. I'm really focused on, can you do these 6 steps? Okay? Can you do these 6 steps? Make it happen, people.